What's going on, guys? Well, we got our white oak mantle all filled in with epoxy and all the checks and voids. Now it's time to get the excess removed and get it ready for sanding. Ooh, that's hard wood.
Good when I'm winning, it makes me want to win more. I'm addicted to victory, I'm a junkie when I score. I feel good when I'm winning, it makes me hammer down. Blasting past the haters, I'm the king of this town.
Yeah, so this mantle actually took about 12 different pours to get all the checks and voids filled. And as you can see, there's a lot of excess epoxy on top. You just want to make sure that everything is filled in all the way to the top of the wood. So the first thing you want to do is obviously get rid of all of our tape that we had on here. This was just used for basically forming up the ends so you don't get a bunch of epoxy running over, and you kind of contain it so it doesn't continually to run over. So there's actually two different ways you can remove this excess epoxy. One of them being sanding, which I used to do quite often, but you go through a lot of sand discs and you just deal with a lot of dust in general. The second way is actually using a heat gun and a putty knife and going along here and kind of preheating this excess and scraping it off. It's a lot faster actually, and a lot cleaner, and a lot less sanding involved. So it takes a little bit to kind of get it warm. As you preheat it, you use your putty knife to just start on the edge there. As you can tell, as it gets warm, that excess comes off pretty easy. There, that leaves you a nice filled check, but by scraping it right across the surface, it doesn't go beyond that. And it just speeds up the finish and sanding process a lot. It only took about 8 to 10 minutes. It leaves the surface in really good condition for sanding. I'll get the other two sides scraped off and then we'll start sanding. That didn't take very long. I think about 30 minutes in total. You know, before I actually knew that little trick, would take hours of sanding. They actually do make a heat gun with a scraper that's built in that sticks out, kind of like out of like a 22 or 45 degree angle, just for doing what you just saw. And so that might be a purchase that we do here in the near future, especially if we're going to keep doing a lot more epoxy mantle types. The only other thing I have to do for scraping purposes is I got to do the corbels. They're still a little bit tacky, so I'm going to let them dry another day. And I'll jump over to the sanding. I'm going to start off with 100 grit, and really what I'm doing with that is just kind of knocking down any of the highs. And before I progress on sanding, like the next step would be 120, 180, and 220. We'll go ahead and then get this cut to the final length, and then go ahead and prep the mantle for the bracket. This side has the really deep checks, and I left the epoxy high a little bit on purpose because just some of the wood grain's a little high as well. And so I'm actually going to start out with 80 grit sandpaper on this orbital sander, and I just want to get some of the highs off so when we do end up cutting this to length, it's a nice flat surface for the saw to run on and we get a nice true cut. Right on. Thank you, Mr. Coulter.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. So yeah, now we got all the highs off the mantle, and now we'll have a nice, good, flat surface to go ahead and cut this to the final length. It stayed nice and square throughout the whole mantle. So we will cut this to length and then start getting it prepped for the bracket. We're going to use a track saw just so it's a nice guided straight cut without using any squares or our other skill saw. So well, we got the mantle all cut to the final length, which is 67 inches. And now we're going to go ahead and get it prepped for the bracket. I just wanted to take a quick second and go over the brackets that we use for our floating mantles and shelves. You know, we used to actually weld and make all of our own, but as we've grown, it didn't work with woodworking and welding in the same shop. The shop actually got pretty small with both of those duties going on inside. So as you all can probably tell, that sawdust and sparks don't go together very well. So I started looking to outsource, and I found this company, Shepherd's Brackets. And so that's the company that makes all of our floating mantle brackets and shelf brackets. So this is actually the floating mantle bracket that we're going to be using for that white oak. This has a 3-inch back plate, and then these are 3/4 inch diameter rods that are 12 inches in length. Here behind me is one of our spray racks that we use to spray the clear coat finish on the mantles. And we actually have one of those floating mantle brackets up here. And you can see the installation is really, really easy. There's basically a hole every 1/2 inch on center. And so you should be able to find adequate studs, especially in a 4 to 5 to 6 to even 8 foot wide spacing. So it makes it really, really nice for installation. As you saw in the video, this is the drill guide that we use. And this is obviously a guide to keep your holes nice and straight. And you have to drill into your piece. It all depends on obviously how thick or wide it is. You're just trying to get the hole started. We don't typically use this and drill the full depth as you saw in the video. We use this to get us down probably about 4 inches or so, get them all started, pull this off, blow out the holes, and then finish to our final depth, either using a mark on the drill bit or using a piece of like painter's blue tape. And as you can imagine, you know, mantles come in a lot of different sizes, and they cover all the lengths and size. You know, they sell a bunch of different rod lengths, back plate sizes for the thickness of your mantle or shelf, and then they also sell 1/2 inch styles too for even skinnier and smaller shelves. These rods here are 12 inches in length, and we're probably actually going to take a little bit off these because that mantle is 12 inches in depth. And so obviously we don't want to poke through. We want to leave about an inch and a half to the face. But they also offer routing plates too. So this mantle doesn't get routed on the back side because it's going to get wrapped with rock when it's all done. And so instead of losing that 1/4 inch in depth, which is how thick the back plates are, we're going to actually not route that. It'll go on, push tight to the bracket, and then it gets wrapped with rock, so that 1/4 inch gap you won't see anyway. They have routing plates for all the different size brackets that they offer. They sell the auger bits. They sell the different routing bits for routing out the backs when you want a nice tight, flush fit to the wall. And so yeah, so they've been a great company to work with. They've made our life a lot easier, being able to provide with all the different jigs and everything to keep us steamrolling along. So if you haven't, go check them out. They might have some cool floating mantle brackets for your next project at home. Well, I hope that answered some of your questions about our floating mantle brackets and the drill guide system that we use. But I'm going to get back after getting that mantle final sanded so we can stain it. Just about done sanding this mantle, but I just wanted to show you one of the things that I continuously do as we sand, and that is to take a pencil and I make lines or marks all the way across from one side to the other. And by doing this just gives you a good indication that you're sanding consistently, and it'll also highlight if there's any little lows in the wood. Wants this mantle to be a smooth finish, but on the ends I'm going to go ahead and buff them, and how I buff them is I use a nylon cut brush. This is a Duragold brand, and what that does is it actually just takes away some of the sapwood or softwoods and makes the grain kind of raise. And I take these nylon cut brushes and I actually mount them up to a car buffer. And the reason why I do that is that these run at a lower RPM than regular grinder or like a metal grinder. Those RPMs are way too high for these bristle brushes, and they'll end up either coming out or just going flat, and you just kind of lose some of the purpose of the cup. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and buff this in, and I'll show you how that just kind of makes the grain kind of pop. Yeah, so that just gives it a really kind of neat finished detail that shows a lot of character of the end grain of the wood and all the growth rings. So I went ahead and buffed both ends of this mantle and the end grain of both of the corbels. So that should just add a really nice touch. All right guys, well the mantle and the corbels have both been cut to length and final sanded, and the mantle's been prepped for the bracket. Next time I'll go over the staining, the clear coat, and the install. Until then, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you maybe learned something and at the very least entertained. If you guys have any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'd be happy to answer them. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.